What if the thing you've always wanted was never truly yours to begin with? Not the job, not the relationship, not the lifestyle, the dream, the image in your mind of what success should look like. What if every major desire you've ever held was an echo? A reflection of someone else's craving, mistaken for your own? This isn't just about advertising, peer pressure, or influence. It goes deeper into the architecture of the human mind, into the very nature of longing. René Girard called it mimetic desire, the idea that we don't generate our wants in isolation. We copy them. We see others want something and instinctively believe it must be valuable. The desire spreads, like a virus, passed from gaze to gaze. Think of Narcissus. The myth tells us he was obsessed with his own reflection. But that's only half the story. He didn't fall in love with himself. He fell in love with an image, something intangible, unreachable. A fantasy shaped by appearance, not essence. We live in an age of reflections. Viral trends that disappear in weeks. Fame that means everything and nothing. Products that promise identity. Lives curated for cameras. People don't just chase happiness. They chase the appearance of happiness. The result is a culture addicted to envy. Not just of things, but of each other's desires. We want what others seem to want, not because it fits us, but because it validates us. In a world defined by imitation, being desired is the highest currency. But what happens when you reach the goal? When will you finally buy the thing? Get the job, the body, the approval? Often, nothing. A quiet disappointment. A subtle emptiness. Because the desire was never rooted in your truth. It was borrowed, programmed, manufactured. Someone else's longing living through your body. And here lies the central riddle of this story. What if the search for meaning has been hijacked by the fear of being irrelevant? This is where the unraveling begins. The moment you question not just what you want, but why you want it. The moment you stop chasing shadows and start tracing their origin. The moment you realize that to reclaim your life, you must first unlearn your desire. This isn't the end of longing. It's the beginning of understanding it. And from that understanding, everything changes. You think you want something. A job title, a house, a partner, a sense of recognition. And yet, the moment you get it, the desire either vanishes or mutates into something new, restless, unsatisfied. You chase again. But if desire were truly yours, wouldn't it ever feel complete? This is the first riddle. Why does what we want always seem to live just beyond what we have? It's tempting to believe our desires are rooted in individuality, the byproduct of personality, taste, or personal history. But what if that's just an illusion? What if the truth is stranger, deeper, and more disturbing? French philosopher René Girard proposed something radical and quietly explosive. Humans don't invent their desires. They inherit them. Not genetically, but socially. We want what others appear to want. We mirror not just actions, but aspirations. In other words, we don't desire things, we desire models. This concept is called mimetic desire. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's not a theory about marketing or peer pressure. It's a theory about human nature itself. Desire is never truly original. It's viral. Take the Garden of Eden. The serpent didn't tempt Eve by emphasizing the fruit's nutritional value or beauty. The temptation worked because the fruit was forbidden, because it was withheld, desired by someone higher. And then Adam wants it, not because he saw the fruit, but because Eve wanted it. Desire replicates. Watch a group of toddlers in a room full of toys. The moment one child picks up a toy, the others suddenly want that exact one. Not the one nearest to them. Not the one objectively more fun. the one being used. Mimetic desire doesn't care about usefulness. It cares about social. Signals. Fast forward to adulthood, and we see the same script, just with more expensive props. Think about luxury brands, high fashion, or the endless viral trends on TikTok. When a person of influence displays a desire, a product, a lifestyle, a mindset, their audience begins to mimic. Not because the item or behavior is inherently valuable, but because the model appears to confer status, happiness, beauty, or belonging. You didn't wake up craving designer shoes, a beach vacation in Bali, or the latest self-help mantra by accident. These desires entered your psyche through mirrors, social feeds, celebrity profiles, coworkers, family members, each reflecting back an image of what's worth chasing. And the deeper trap? Mimetic desire creates scarcity even when abundance exists, because we don't just want the object, we want to be the only one who has it. The moment others have it too, the thrill dissolves. We're left chasing the next desire that still feels unique, untainted by others. It's not the thing we crave, it's the exclusive reflection of wanting it first. This is why desire always outruns us, because it was never designed to end. It loops, it feeds on imitation. And in the age of algorithmic attention, we now inhabit a world where millions of desires can be copied, scaled, and injected into our minds within seconds. You scroll a feed, and without realizing it, you're absorbing thousands of signals about what's beautiful, valuable, desirable. You're not deciding what to want. You're catching desire like a virus. But if what we want is learned through imitation, then how much of our personality is actually ours? How many life goals are just echoes of someone else's dream? This isn't just about consumption. It's about identity, about the self. And the danger isn't just that we might want the wrong things. The danger is that we might lose ourselves entirely in chasing shadows, reflections of other people's desires, while never encountering the source of our own. In a world full of mirrors, the self becomes fragmented. A child chasing silhouettes in a dark hallway, thinking each shadow is real, only to discover, too late, that they were never chasing themselves. This is the nature of mimetic desire. And it doesn't stop here, because once we all start wanting the same things, something strange happens. We don't just imitate, we compete. We don't just admire our models, we begin to resent them. Desire, when shared, becomes rivalry, and that rivalry is where power, violence, and the myth of the enemy begin. Let's go deeper. We begin by imitating. That's how desire enters. US. But imitation, left unchecked, doesn't lead to peace. It leads to conflict. What happens when too many people want the same thing? What happens when everyone chases the same crown? This is the paradox of mimetic desire. The moment we idolize someone, we begin to compete with them. The model becomes an obstacle. The person we admire becomes the person we need to overcome. What starts as reverence ends in rivalry. In the Bible, Cain and Abel both offer sacrifices. Abel's is favored, Cain's is not. But God never tells Cain he cannot improve or be accepted. Still, Cain murders his brother, not out of necessity, not out of survival, but because Abel became a mirror Cain could no longer tolerate. He couldn't kill his own inadequacy, so he killed the one who reflected it. This is the first recorded murder, and it wasn't driven by scarcity. It was driven by mimetic tension. Fast forward several thousand years and little has changed. Watch a celebrity rise, and you can time the backlash like a metronome. Adoration peaks. Then comes resentment, envy, dismantling. The crowd that once cheered begins sharpening its knives. Why? Because we don't just imitate idols, we want to become them. And the closer we get to that ideal, the more their existence becomes intolerable. They remind us of what we are not. Their success feels like theft. Their beauty feels like betrayal. Scroll through Instagram. You see someone whose life seems perfect. The envy is instant, often silent, but over time, admiration curdles. You begin to search for cracks. You want to find flaws. You want to dethrone them, even just a little. Their success feels like it came at your expense. Mimetic desire isn't content with shared admiration. It pushes us toward zero-sum thinking. If someone has something desirable, then there's less of it for you. Even if it's intangible, fame, love, attention, meaning, it feels finite. This is the psychological root of rivalry. And rivalry doesn't breed clarity. It breeds confusion. In time, we can no longer tell whether we want the thing itself, or just to win it from the other. The ancient Romans knew this dynamic intimately. Gladiators weren't just entertainment. They were psychological surrogates. Watching one man destroy another satisfied something primal, the urge to see the idol punished, to watch desire collapse into violence. It wasn't the fight itself that mattered. It was the tension of who would get the crowd's love and who would lose it. The modern world has swapped swords for screens, but the crowd remains. Look at comment sections on viral posts, or the sudden swarms of criticism after a celebrity misstep. A million strangers unite not in reasoned disagreement, but in collective punishment. Admiration turns quickly to hostility, not because the idol changed, but because our relationship to them did. The model becomes too close, too real, too threatening. And so we destroy what we once adored. But what happens when every person is both an idol and imitator? When we're all locked in endless loops of admiration, jealousy, resentment, and performance. This isn't just happening at the top, it's happening everywhere. Social media has made everyone a potential model. Everyone competes for attention, validation, and visibility. And the crowd is always watching, applauding one moment, attacking the next. Desire has become a battlefield, and no one leaves untouched, because the more people chase the same dream, the more the dream becomes a weapon. The throne everyone craves is set ablaze, and yet we still crawl toward it, pushing others down, hoping the fire won't reach us first. This is the dark logic of mimetic rivalry. It doesn't just shape who we envy, it shapes who we become. And when rivalries erupt across a society, when everyone mirrors, competes, and blames, something ominous begins to rise. A solution, a sacrifice, a scapegoat. And that is where we go next. When too many people want the same thing, conflict is inevitable. Rivalries multiply. Tensions escalate. Imitation breeds resentment, and resentment demands resolution. But when no one can back down, when everyone believes they deserve the crown, society reaches a boiling point. This is what René Girard called a mimetic crisis. A moment when shared desires lead not to unity, but to chaos. The closer we all get to the same object, power, prestige, purity, truth, the more violent our competition becomes, and so a solution is born. Not through reason, not through peace, but through sacrifice. In every era of human history, you will find it, the scapegoat. The innocent or different one who is blamed, exiled, punished, or killed, not because they caused the crisis, but because their removal temporarily restores order. It is a primitive mechanism. But it works. And because it works, it keeps repeating. Girard argued that religion, law, and culture all grew out of this ritualized violence, the attempt to control mimetic chaos by directing it toward a single, expendable victim. In tribal societies, this meant human sacrifices. In ancient civilizations, it meant public executions. In modern societies, it looks different, but the logic is the same. Consider the crucifixion of Christ not as a religious symbol, but as a social event. A man emerges, disrupts the system, questions the powers, attracts followers. The crowd grows anxious. Religious authorities panic. Political leaders seek control. Accusations build. Fear multiplies, and then consensus forms. He must die. And once he does, the tension subsides. The crowd breathes again. Order is restored. But not because justice was served, because someone took the fall. This is the terrifying brilliance of the scapegoat. Ritual. It disguises violence as virtue. The pattern is everywhere. During Europe's witch trials, women were burned not because they posed a real threat, but because their destruction gave frightened societies a false sense of purity. During lynchings in America, entire towns gathered around brutal executions, not in grief, but in celebration. The mob found unity through shared outrage. Even today, with our modern sensitivities and legal systems, the scapegoat ritual lives on. We just call it something else. Cancel culture. Political witch hunts, viral takedowns, character assassinations. Social media mobs. One mistake, one accusation, one wrong word, and the crowd turns. Suddenly, one person becomes the source of all problems. They are blamed for what everyone was already feeling but could not name. Their downfall becomes symbolic, cleansing, but the truth is always more complicated. The crisis existed before. The scapegoat. The tension was already there. The victim didn't create it, they merely absorbed it. A white lamb, painted black by 1,000 hands, then cast out into the desert. This is how societies cleanse themselves without ever confronting the root. It's easier to burn a witch than to question the fear that invented witches in the first place. It's easier to blame a single figure than to face the reality that the conflict lives in all of us. Scapegoating is not just a social process. It's a psychological escape. It allows us to avoid our own contradictions. We see the flaws in others, project our guilt, and join the crowd, not because we're evil, but because we're afraid to stand alone. And when the crowd unites, it feels like peace. But it's not peaceful. It's temporary anesthesia, because as long as mimetic rivalry exists, the cycle will continue. The next crisis will arrive, and once again, someone will be chosen, marked, condemned, erased, not for what they did, but for what we refuse to confront ourselves. And so we arrive at the next layer of deception. Because while the crowd hunts its scapegoat, another force begins to manipulate the shadows. Not out of chaos, but out of control. Desire isn't just mirrored, it's manufactured. And behind that machinery is power. If desire can be mimicked, it can be manipulated. And if it can be manipulated, then someone, somewhere, is pulling the strings. In a world overwhelmed by information, distraction, and spectacle, our desires rarely emerge in silence. They are shaped, sculpted by hands we rarely see. We believe we are choosing. In truth, we are being chosen. The question is no longer what do you want, but who wants you to want it? This is the machinery behind modern life. Not random, not chaotic, but deeply calculated. Not by fate or instinct, but by systems, industries, and institutions built on one foundational insight. Control the image, and you control the desire. Enter Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud and the father of modern propaganda. In the 1920s, Bernays took Freud's ideas about unconscious drives and applied them not to therapy, but to marketing and politics. He didn't just sell products, he sold identities. Cigarettes weren't sticks of tobacco. They were torches. A freedom for women. Cars weren't machines. They were symbols of masculinity, power, and success. He didn't ask people what they wanted. He told them what to want and made them believe it was their idea. This wasn't deception. It was orchestration. He understood that desire was social, not rational, that people imitate more than they choose. And so he built systems that turned the human mind into a programmable device. Bernays opened the door. Corporations, governments, advertisers, and media moguls walked through it. Today, we live in a theater of manufactured longing. Reality is mediated through curated images. Influencers stage authenticity. Politicians script outrage. News cycles. Engineers fear. Brands sell identity, not utility. Every image is a suggestion. Every suggestion, a seed. And we are the fertile ground like Plato's prisoners in the cave. We sit in darkness watching shadows on the wall, believing them to be real. But the shadows are cast by those who know the truth. Whoever controls the image controls the crowd. Desire becomes less about feeling and more about performance. People shape their personalities to fit algorithms. They broadcast curated lives to gain followers, likes, validation. But here's the twist. Even the influencers are influenced. Even the marionettes are held by strings, controlled by larger forces, trends, corporate deals, audience demands. The puppeteer wears a mask. But behind that mask is not a single face, it's a network, a system, a feedback loop of manufactured desire and engineered identity. And the most insidious part? It feels good. There is a seductive comfort in being told what to want. It removes the burden of introspection. It replaces uncertainty with imitation. It gives you ready-made answers. To the question, who am I? The problem is, the answers were never yours to begin with. This is how control evolves. Not through chains, but through cravings. Not by force, but by seduction. You aren't told what to believe. You're shown what others desire, and so you begin to desire it too. The more you mimic, the more you comply. And the more you comply, the more the system thrives. Propaganda today doesn't announce itself with slogans. It whispers through aesthetics, through virality, through repetition. It doesn't just influence thought, it infects the structures of desire. And so we return to the central question, who profits from your hunger? The answer is layered. Corporations profit from your need to belong. Politicians profit from your fear. Platforms profit from your addiction. Movements profit from your outrage. Someone always profits as long as your desires remain directed outward, because outward-facing desire is controllable. Inward desire is not, and that's the hidden threat to the system, authentic selfhood. If enough people stop imitating and start creating, stop consuming and start questioning, the machine begins to break. Not through revolution, but through refusal, through silence, through reorientation. But that is not an easy path. It requires confronting the self beneath, the performance. It demands solitude, honesty, the courage to want something no one else applauds, which brings us to the threshold of rebellion, not against governments or brands, but against the internalized need to perform. To escape the theater, you must first recognize the stage. And then choose to leave it. After so much imitation, so much spectacle, so much noise, there comes a moment of silence. A moment where the outside world feels hollow. The crowd no longer satisfies. The mirror no longer reflects anything real. This is where the rebellion begins. Not against society, but against the self that was built to please it. The question arises, what would you desire if no one were watching? Not what would make you famous or admired or accepted, but what would make you whole? Carl Jung called this path individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, not by adding more, but by peeling away everything that isn't you. every imitation, every borrowed belief, every performance was shaped to match a crowd's applause, but this journey isn't glamorous. It begins in the dark. It begins with the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've disowned because they didn't fit the script we were given. Our aggression, our fear, our longing, our contradictions. To individuate, we must face these inner exiles not to be rid of them, but to reintegrate them. Only by embracing the shadow can we begin to reclaim the pieces of our authentic self, buried under years of mimicry. This is why so many myths begin with a hermit, the figure who walks alone into the forest, into the cave, into solitude, not to escape life, but to find the life behind the illusion. Not all who isolate are lost. Some isolate to finally listen. Think of Thoreau leaving society to live simply in the woods, or the mystics and monks who retreat from the world not in bitterness, but in search of a different truth. They are not rejecting humanity. They are peeling back the layers of collective noise to hear something quieter, more ancient. This rebellion is not loud. It is not televised. It is not branded. It begins in the quiet refusal to imitate. To desire not from envy, but from essence. And in that silence, something stirs. A different kind of longing. Not for consumption or conquest, but for meaning, for truth, for integration. To walk away from the cracked mirror is to risk being misunderstood, ignored, even rejected. But it is also the only way to see clearly. This is not the end of desire. It's the beginning of a new kind. A desire that no longer chases shadows, but builds light from within. The false self must die not in despair, but in transformation, because what emerges next is not performance. It is presence. And from that presence, something radical begins to take shape. A self that cannot be sold, swayed, or seduced. Not because it has all the answers, but because it finally stopped asking the crowd. What if desire could be rewritten? Not conditioned by fear, not infected by imitation, not scripted by society, but born from something deeper, something only you could uncover and only you could create. After we strip away the mimicry, the rivalry, the crowd, and the mask, what remains? This is the sacred question. The one every myth, every mystic, every true artist has wrestled with in solitude, and it begins with a shift from chasing pleasure to pursuing meaning. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "That man is not destroyed by suffering. He is destroyed by suffering without meaning." Even in the depths of a concentration camp, those who found purpose, even fragile, flickering purpose, endured. The body was starved, but the soul, when anchored in meaning, could remain intact. This is the foundation of transcendent desire. It does not emerge from hunger or fear or envy. It emerges from purpose, from alignment, from the realization that you are not here to consume or copy, but to create. And creation requires risk, because authentic desire always begins as strangeness. It does not mirror, it is invented. It speaks in symbols before it speaks in words. The crowd will not understand it, not at first, but that's the point. If everyone already approves of your desire, it probably isn't yours. This is why visionaries, artists, saints, rebels so often walk alone. Not because they reject society, but because they must leave it long enough to hear a different voice, the one that whispers not what is popular, but what is true. In ancient alchemy, there was a process of transformation, turning base metals into gold. But the deeper meaning wasn't physical, it was spiritual. Alchemy was a metaphor for the human soul. You begin as something raw, reactive, chaotic. Through pressure and fire, you are refined. What emerges is not new material. It is the same self, purified, awakened, aligned. True desire is alchemical. It takes pain and repurposes it. It takes longing and gives it form. It transforms imitation into innovation. And here, in this inner crucible, the individual becomes sovereign. Not a puppet, not a reflection, not a scapegoat, but a creator. Not of products or personas, but of a life that is internally coherent. A life that expresses what only that person could offer. This is not ambition in the traditional sense. It is not conquest. It is not domination. It is creation as communion, expression as healing, desire as devotion, and devotion is immune to mimicry. It cannot be copied because it does not seek applause. It simply is, burning quietly in the soul, illuminating the path forward, regardless of who's watching. Picture this, a garden blooming. In a desert, no crowd, no camera, no stage. Just color erupting where no one thought life could exist, and yet it does. The flowers are shaped like forgotten dreams, vivid, strange, unmistakably real. Not because they were expected, but because they were true. That's what it means to desire from meaning. To walk away from the echo chamber of culture, to risk being misunderstood, and to plant something in barren soil, trusting it will bloom. And if enough people do this, quietly, courageously, something changes. Not just in individuals, but in the world. A culture of mimicry begins to unravel. A new kind of society starts to take shape. One where value is not dictated by trends, but discovered through introspection. One where power is not seized, but shared. One where desire is not manufactured, but honored. Because when enough people stop chasing borrowed dreams, they start building original realities. Not to impress, not to compete, but to become. And in that becoming, the alchemy is complete. Not gold, but something rarer, a life that is whole. There is a kind of seeing that changes everything. Not the gaze conditioned by envy, not the eye trained to measure, compare, or consume, but a deeper vision, the one that emerges when all illusions have been stripped away. When you no longer imitate, you no longer serve, you are no longer caught in the loops of borrowed longing. The desires of the crowd no longer move you. The noise of the world no longer defines you. And the systems that once seduce you with images and idols begin to lose their grip. This is what happens when you see through desire, not destroy it, not abandon it, but see through it, clearly, fully, without flinching. You see how it was built. You see who profits from it. You see how it shaped you and how you allowed it. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to unravel. Power others held over you begins to evaporate. Their praise, their beauty, their wealth, their dominance, all of it loses its luster. You are no longer a prisoner of projection, no longer orbiting someone else's sun. Instead, something ancient begins to rise. Not a product, not a persona, but a presence. Your own, not loud, not grand, but real, unshakable. A center that doesn't move when the world spins. And from this center, life begins again, not as performance, but as participation. Not to impress, but to create. Not to compete, but to express. You do not renounce the world. You return to it, but no longer hungry for validation, no longer addicted to mirrors. You walk through the theater, but you do not act. You move among shadows, but you are not deceived. This is the quiet rebellion, the unseen revolution, the turning of the inner eye away from illusion and toward truth. So now the question remains, will you keep chasing the reflection, always just out of reach, always shaped by others? Or will you become the one who shapes it? The world doesn't need more mimicry. It needs originality. It needs people who have remembered what it means to see clearly, to burn without burning out, to create without copying, to stand still while Everything else performs. A single candle in a room of mirrors, burning, unwavering, alone, and as it burns, the mirrors begin to melt, until there is no more reflection, only light.